He wasn't rich, he wasn't famous, but in a tight-knit corner of Limerick, Michael Hayes was known and loved. A gentle pensioner who walked the same path every day, nodded to the same neighbors, and returned to the same modest apartment each night, until one night he didn't. It was a warm summer evening in Limerick, the kind of Thursday that slips by unnoticed. The city had just begun to settle into quiet, but inside a residential block near the milk market, a sound broke the silence. Michael Hayes, a man in his early 70s, opened his front door, maybe to check on the noise, maybe just by habit. What followed next would send shockwaves through the city and leave a community asking how such a thing could happen in their streets. Because sometime between 11 and midnight, Michael was attacked not by a stranger in the shadows, but reportedly by someone he may have known in his own complex, near his own doorstep. The weapon? A vodka bottle shoved into a plastic bag, a tool of sudden, vicious violence. A man who lived simply, helped walk neighbors' dogs, and always said hello, beaten to death in what Gardaí now believe was a targeted, brutal assault. Limerick isn't meant for headlines like this, a neighbor whispered to reporters the next morning. Not like this. Within hours, blue Garda tape sealed off St. Michael's Court. A forensic tent rose under the morning sun, and all around, disbelief turned to dread. The kind of dread that asks if it could happen to Michael, who's really safe anymore. Because while the city slept, something evil slipped in, and it didn't just take a life. It shattered a sense of peace that may never fully return. To the world, he might just be another name in a crime report. But to those in St. Michael's Court, Michael Hayes was something else entirely. He wasn't just a pensioner. He was a presence, quiet, kind, and dependable. A man in his early 70s who had lived in the same Limerick apartment block for years, not causing waves, but gently holding the social fabric together with little gestures most people wouldn't notice. He walked every day, rain or shine. Locals say he was always polite, the kind to say hello with a half smile and ask how your day was going without expecting much back. He didn't have a big family around, but he made up for it by being a neighbor people could trust. He fed birds, he took bins in, and most notably he walked Daisy, the little dog that belonged to a woman on the floor below. One neighbor, Geraldine Costello, summed him up in one sentence. Michael would do anything for anyone. He was a lovely, lovely man. He'd no bad bone in his body. People remembered him by his habits. He liked his routes. He liked his quiet. But most of all, he liked being useful in a city where elderly folks often feel invisible. Michael stood out by how present he was. It wasn't just Daisy the dog who missed him when the Gardaí arrived that Friday morning. It was the silence that followed, the absence, the gap he left behind. Daisy's been crying all the time. I think she knows, Geraldine added softly. I don't think she understands why he's not coming anymore. Michael Hayes didn't deserve a violent end. And in every word spoken by those who knew him, you feel that truth echoing over and over again. He never harmed a soul, so who would want to harm him? It was Thursday evening, the 10th of July. St. Michael's Court, a modest apartment block tucked near the milk market in Limerick, had fallen into its usual rhythm, quiet, predictable, familiar. By around 11:30, the flats were mostly dark. Doors were shut. Televisions were low. The kind of stillness that only comes at the end of a summer day. But something broke the silence. Michael Hayes, a man in his early 70s, stepped outside his apartment. Maybe he heard a noise. Maybe he sensed something wasn't right. Maybe, like every other time in his life, he was just trying to help. That decision would cost him his life. Within moments, Michael was attacked. Gardai now believed he was struck with a vodka bottle wrapped inside a bag, a blunt and brutal weapon used with such force that it caused devastating injuries to his head. He didn't stand a chance. Neighbors reported hearing a commotion. Some say they thought it was shouting. Others say it was the sound of something or someone falling. But by the time the emergency services arrived, Michael was already unconscious, lying just outside his door. He was rushed to University Hospital Limerick, still clinging to life. But in the early hours of Friday, the 11th of July, Michael Hayes was pronounced dead. By sunrise, St. Michael's Court was sealed off. A white forensic tent stood where Michael had fallen. Garda investigators began going door to door. Residents woke to the blue lights flashing through their curtains and the terrifying realization that someone had been killed right there in the hallway they used every day. A quiet night, a short walk, a few minutes. That's all it took to turn a peaceful apartment block into a murder scene, and no one saw it coming. It wasn't a knife. It wasn't a gun. It was something far more chilling because it was so ordinary. According to Gardai, the weapon used to kill Michael Hayes was a vodka bottle wrapped inside a bag, a household object turned into a blunt force weapon. Not planned, not clinical, raw, brutal, personal. Investigators believe the attacker placed the glass bottle inside either a plastic or fabric bag, a method that could muffle the sound, reduce fingerprints, and give the assailant a better grip. But it also made the weapon more dangerous. With the added force, the glass didn't need to shatter to be deadly. It just needed to hit the right spot, and it did. Michael Hayes was struck in the head multiple times according to early forensic reports, enough force to cause severe skull fractures and brain trauma, enough to kill a man in his 70s quickly. Crime scene analysts recovered fragments consistent with broken glass. They also found a torn shopping-style bag near the entrance now being tested for DNA. The choice of weapon raises questions. Was it improvised in the moment, a fit of rage? Or was it carried in suggesting premeditation, hidden in plain sight? In either case, it tells us this. The killer didn't need a weapon from a dark alley or black market. They walked in with something you'd find in a kitchen cabinet and left behind a crime so violent that experienced Gardai reportedly called it one of the worst assaults on a pensioner in recent memory. A bottle, a bag, and a man who never saw it coming. Less than 12 hours after Michael Hayes was pronounced dead, Garda made their first move. On the morning of Friday, the 11th of July, a man in his 40s was arrested in connection with the murder. He was taken into custody under Section 4 of the Criminal Justice Act, which allows investigators to hold a suspect for up to 24 hours for questioning. Here's what we know and what makes this arrest even more disturbing. The suspect was not a stranger. According to multiple sources, Gardai believe he was known to Michael, possibly even lived in the same apartment block or had regular contact with him. Not a family member, but someone familiar. Someone who could have walked through the corridor without raising suspicion. He's being described as a local man with a history of instability and past run-ins with Gardai. What those previous incidents involved has not been made public yet, but early reports suggest this may not have been his first act of violence. Forensic teams focused on the scene throughout Friday and Saturday, gathering evidence from the hallway, stairwells, and bins. A torn shopping bag and possible bottle fragments were recovered and sent for lab analysis. CCTV footage from surrounding buildings is also being reviewed. Neighbors told journalists they had seen the suspect earlier in the evening acting erratically and possibly under the influence. One woman said, "I saw him pacing near the stairwell. He looked out of it, but we never thought it would come to this." There is no official confirmation yet of the motive, but Gardaí are confident the man in custody was involved. His relationship to Michael Hayes, whatever it was now, lies at the center of the investigation. And here's the most haunting part. If this man truly knew Michael, if they had crossed paths before, then what happened that night wasn't just violence. It was a betrayal delivered with something as ordinary as a vodka bottle. At the heart of every murder lies a question: why? And in the case of Michael Hayes, that question only grows louder with every detail uncovered. From what Gardaí have revealed so far, robbery does not appear to be the primary motive. Michael was not known to carry large sums of money. He lived modestly. There was no sign of forced entry, and nothing of value was reported missing from his home. So if not robbery, then what? Here are the three leading theories Gardaí are currently exploring. An argument turned deadly. Some residents claim to have heard raised voices earlier that evening. Gardaí believe the suspect and Michael may have had an altercation, possibly verbal, shortly before the attack. Michael was not known for confrontation, but if he opened the door in response to a dispute, the situation could have escalated fast. A vodka bottle in a bag isn't a weapon of precision. It's impulsive, brutal. It suggests rage, not calculation. A moment of psychosis or drug-induced violence. Sources say the suspect had a history of unstable behavior, possibly involving substance abuse or mental health crises. This wasn't a break-in. This wasn't a targeted hit. It might have been a violent outburst directed at the first person the attacker encountered. If Michael happened to be in the wrong place or worse, tried to calm the situation, he may have been caught in the storm. Long-standing tensions inside the complex. Some neighbors now admit that the apartment block had recently become tense. Arguments over noise, strangers coming and going, reports of late-night disruptions. While none of this points directly to a motive, it sets the stage for conflict. Michael, being one of the more stable and respected residents, might have spoken up. Was he targeted because he represented order in a building slowly tipping into chaos? At this stage, Gardaí have not confirmed a single clear motive. But what's becoming undeniable is this: Michael Hayes wasn't killed for money. He wasn't killed in a robbery gone wrong. He was killed by anger or madness or something much darker, and possibly by someone who should have never been near him in the first place. The morning after the murder, St. Michael's Court didn't just wake up to flashing blue lights, and police tape it woke up to grief, to fear, to disbelief that Michael Hayes, of all people, could be gone. And gone in such a violent, senseless way. News of his death spread quickly through the city. But it wasn't the headlines that stung the most, it was the silence that followed. The empty seat at the park bench, the quiet corridor where he used to say hello, and the heartbroken whimper of Daisy, the neighbor's dog he used to walk. It's like the whole street has gone quiet. Even the air feels different, said Tracy Coleman, a woman who lived just 2 floors below. Michael was a lovely man, always polite, always helping out. He didn't deserve this. Flowers started to appear outside the building by that afternoon, simple bouquets, handwritten cards, a small candle. One note read, "Rest in peace, Michael. You were one of the good ones." Neighbors gathered in groups, speaking in hushed tones. Some cried openly. Others simply stared at the spot where the forensic tent had stood hours earlier. Even the Gardaí, who had seen more than most, appeared shaken. This wasn't just a crime scene, one resident said. It was Michael's home and ours. Beyond the apartment block, Limerick residents took to social media. Posts were shared hundreds of times. How can something like this happen to a pensioner in his own building? My Nana lives near there. She's terrified now. That poor man, walking someone's dog, minding his business. What is this city turning into? Local politicians and community leaders echoed the concerns. There were calls for more Garda patrols, better lighting, and stricter screening of tenants in shared housing units. But beneath all the talk was something deeper, a sense that something had cracked. That if Michael Hayes could be killed, then the definition of safe in this city might have just changed. This wasn't just the loss of a neighbor. It was the loss of peace. And no one in St. Michael's Court is sleeping quite the same anymore. The hardest part of this case isn't just the violence, it's the silence that came before it, and the silence that followed. Michael Hayes died just steps from his front door, in a shared apartment complex, in a hallway that echoes at the sound of a cough, and yet no one stopped it. Neighbors heard something. Some said there were raised voices. Others heard what they thought was furniture moving. One person even described it as a bang, like something hitting a wall. But no one intervened in time. No one saw the final moments. No one opened their door. And now they're all asking the same question. Could he have been saved? It's the kind of doubt that eats away slowly. Was someone just one floor above? Was someone watching telly with the volume too high? Was someone afraid to get involved? Even the Gardaí are said to be troubled by this part of the investigation, not because people did something wrong, but because the delay in calling for help may have cost Michael precious minutes. Minutes that might have made a difference. We just thought it was a row. Nothing serious, one resident said. You hear stuff all the time around here. But this time, it wasn't a row. It was a man being beaten with a bottle. And so now, the building lives with the what-ifs. What if someone had opened the door sooner? What if someone had shouted? What if Michael hadn't opened his? It's not guilt, not exactly. It's something darker, a shared helplessness. The realization that evil didn't come with a warning. It walked through the same front door as everyone else, and it left through silence. Michael Hayes didn't live a complicated life. He wasn't part of a gang. He didn't owe anyone money. He didn't have enemies. He walked a dog, took out the bins, checked on his neighbors. So why did he die in such a brutal, personal, and almost cinematic act of violence? The suspect is in custody. The forensic work is underway. Gardaí are piecing together CCTV statements, DNA evidence. The story, in legal terms, is moving forward. But for the people who knew Michael, and for the country now watching this case unfold, nothing feels resolved. Because the real answer hasn't been given. Not in court, not in press briefings, not in any official statement. The real question that lingers like a shadow in that hallway is the most human one of all. Why him? Why an elderly man who had harmed no one? Why in his own home, in a place he trusted? Why was he met with rage when he stepped outside to do what he'd always done: help? There is no motive that will satisfy the people who lit candles outside St. Michael's Court. No sentence harsh enough to reverse the horror of that night. This wasn't just a crime. It was a rupture in trust, in peace, in the simple belief that home is where we are safe. And so the story ends where it began, not with answers, but with a man quiet, kind, and now gone. And a question that may never fully go away. Why?